So if you want to go to the next slide, then there for me, Esther, thanks. All right, so I think in the context of beyond peering and what we're trying to achieve here, I think it's very important for us just to quickly have a look at the scale of Africa and some of the stats around it at a very high level, just to understand what we have to work with in our region. As you can see on the left there, a very interesting thing we did was to take some of the major countries in the world where a lot of internet traffic is generated from, and compile them and overlay them on the African map. And it kind of ends up being very scary to realize, you know, what we have to deal with. And then if you look at the stats on the right, we have 54 countries, we have over 20 cable systems. But I think what's very important to highlight is the fact that we have only currently 46 internet exchange points that service this footprint. It is incredible. I mean, we basically saying, you know, we only have one exchange point per country, give or take, and we have to service a continent that has, you know, a very, very large population. So again, going back to what Susan's saying, is internet exchange points truly become the backbone for our access to these subsea cables, to the capacity that we have, and also the content that we need. Thanks, Susan. Oh, sorry, Esther, if you can go to the next one. All right, so we go back and we say, all right, well, we know the continent, we know how big we are and why peering matters. So I think one of the main things that we all know and we all understand is it lowers latency. So it provides us with a direct hop between networks, connects networks, brings them together, and again, in the context of the enterprise, it helps them build out networks that have better performance and better experiences for their users or their customers. We also, I think one of the main drivers behind, you know, joining these peering internet exchanges and starting to peer is to reduce cost. I think Susan showed it beautifully, the fact that when we start, you know, joining internet exchanges and getting more members onto these internet exchanges in regions, we start relying less and less on our international transit, which we know is a costly expense. Adding to the fact that we reduce latency, have happier customers, happier enterprises using these services, using service providers to do these things, we also, again, provide an ecosystem that ultimately benefits the end user where we want to be. So it's extremely key to choose the right internet exchanges where we have the most members and the most routes. But if we do this in a sort of a conscious fashion, we definitely start relying less and less on our international transit, and that's where we want to be. We want to keep our traffic local as much as humanly possible, or within a region. That being said, when we start looking at enterprises as an example, they started moving into cloud for a very specific reason. They want to get the scalability, flexibility we all know. When we start looking at in the space of peering, when we start having people go into carrier neutral data centers, joining internet exchanges, now all of a sudden we have increased capacity. You know, when we're looking at local tails or last miles within country, we're looking at maybe a 5 meg, 10 meg, 20 meg. I mean, some of these capacities in certain countries are extremely expensive. But when we start looking at it in a different view, where we look at internet exchanges and data centers, you know, instantly we have this ability to go and increase our capacity, increase the speed, lower latency. So the story just keeps, you know, adding up and you know, adding to the reason why peering and internet exchanges are so important, even in the enterprise space. And again, finally, when we look at why this matters, it ends up being a direct result or direct value add for our customers, for our users. Lower latency, less let's say reliance on international transits, overall happy customer, and again more business for all of us, and just a much better environment and ecosystem to work in. Thanks, Esther. All right, so now we've looked at why peering matters. Let's look at the value of the internet exchanges. I mean, the first one and the most forefront of mind is bringing networks together. that is something that in internet exchanges and the people working very hard behind the scenes have been extremely good at doing, and that is why it has just grown strength to strength. So it's a neutral environment. It's a platform that's provided for members to join, and as more members join and the experiences improve and the services available, more and more members join, and it's sort of a knock-on effect. And again, it's such a nice environment if it's done correctly, because again, there is no, it's neutral. There's no pressure. There's no partiality. So that's a definite value. Now, again, if you contrast that to what traditional IXs have been looking at themselves and saying their value is more in the capacity that they provide, or the amount of content delivery networks or operators or large hyperscalers connected to them. I wanted to try and just highlight that we kind of sometimes missing the point here in where the other value lies with internet exchanges, over and above just a conversation around capacity. So I think one of those elements that I've personally experienced over the past few years is what separates a normal internet exchange with a really, really good one, is that they act as trusted advisors, not just for the service providers, but for all members. And again, we want to try and get the message out there to get enterprises on board into internet exchanges, to build bigger networks, larger networks, advertise more routes, rely less on international transit. So again, when you have an internet exchange that's inherently involved in your ecosystem, they act as sort of a trusted advisor. They act as a broker to new relationships. Again, one of those things I've personally experienced time and time again is the value of an internet exchange as a broker to new relationships. We've managed to build out enterprise networks using internet exchanges and the knowledge that they have and the people that they know and the members that they have to great effect. And ultimately, as I said, the net result is giving the customers the best experience. And then finally, what we find there is new services. So I think the reliance on, and again, in the context of beyond peering, internet exchanges aren't just a place for networks to peer, but there's also new services that they constantly, bring to the table that service providers and enterprises can kind of jointly work together and actually do things with. So, and I think the one front and center at the moment is the cloud exchange, and I think that has added the most value. Notwithstanding COVID, but even prior to COVID, I feel that services like L2 services available through internet exchanges, but predominantly the concept of a cloud exchange or a cloud on-ramp has been extremely, extremely useful as new services are concerned. Thanks, Esther. Can you just go to the next slide there? All right, so how do we this is a very high level, and then I'll explain how this diagram sort of contrasts the before and after scenario, bringing all these various elements together. So, I'm taking a look at a couple of our enterprise networks from, let's say, 2016 prior to that. And what I just didn't depict correctly, with more detail, is the two circles indicate a local exchange that we connect to pick up internet or IP transit, and then that goes to a UK internet exchange. So prior to 2016, and this is avoiding the additional work that, again, going to the broker of new relationships conversation I had just now, where our internet exchanges have gone to the content delivery networks, to the large hyperscalers, to where the content is, trying to broker these relationships and bring them locally. Prior to that, we basically had enterprise networks that had to buy, or generally speaking, buy a local loop to a local internet exchange where they can pick up IP transit. And that IP transit, let's say in this case, will go to London, where in most cases, that's where our content was. So you can see a net result is we had access to, some of the content there that I've just put in the bubble there, but at very high latency. And there was no other way. So what we have done on the right-hand side with the evolution and the real inclusion of internet exchanges, on the continent at least, brokering these relationships, getting the content providers to bring their content into the, onto the continent, adding the concept of a local cloud exchange. You look at it, what it looks like now, where customers will buy access into a local internet exchange where they have access to a cloud exchange. And at the same time, the content providers are connecting to the same content, exchanges. And you have the flexibility of now going and peering directly, or in the case of Microsoft, for instance, with public peering, or using Microsoft as your peering services as an example. But the list is endless, and the opportunity is there. But you can see the massive reduction in latency is one of the main benefits, plus the capacity. I mean, now we can peer with a content provider at a 1 gig, 10 gig, 100 gig, for instance, where before we were buying IP transit at a per meg cost. So it's a great cost saving on that side, and also just a really good scenario to be in. Okay, next one, thanks. And I think, in summing everything up, and again, with the concept of beyond peering, what is the future value of the African Internet Exchange point? What are the enterprises that we have discussions with all the time? What are the service providers looking at internet exchanges for that future value? And I think one of the things is to keep driving that conversation with enterprises and large, peering partners, and getting more members on board. Expansion of local routes, the implementation of more cloud exchanges would be, something that would add more value on the continent. Peering services automation, we see that in some other regions, and we want to bring that into the African exchange and say, do the same thing, automate peering services, making it a lot easier to peer with other providers or service providers or enterprises. SDN services, we're talking about point-to-point connectivity, data center to data center, using the footprint that the internet exchanges have largely built in combination with data centers to greater effect. And finally, providing more live stats and analytics, which, again, going back to what Susan's saying, the more you know, the better decisions you can make in terms of strategy. And that's ultimately what we also see as future value in the internet exchange.